3 days after my husband's funeral, my mother-in-law changed the locks on our home and had security escort me out with nothing but my purse and a garbage bag full of clothes. But before I share what happened next, I want you to imagine you're sitting down with me, listening to this as if we're old friends catching up. Drop a comment telling me what city you're tuning in from, and if this story moves you, hit that like button and subscribe so I can keep sharing stories like this one. Now, let me tell you how my whole life fell apart and then came back together in ways I never could have imagined. My name is Naomi, and I had been married to Darius for 5 years when pancreatic cancer took him from me at just 38 years old. We met at a community art show in Detroit when I was working as a receptionist at a dental office, and he was an art appraiser for a small auction house. He saw me standing in front of a painting, crying because it reminded me of my grandmother who had just passed, and instead of walking away from the strange crying woman, he handed me his handkerchief and stood there with me in silence until I was ready to talk. That was Darius. Quiet, patient, the kind of man who showed love through actions, not words. When he proposed, it wasn't with some flashy public display. He took me back to that same gallery, stood me in front of that same painting, and got down on one knee. I said yes before he even finished asking. But marrying Darius meant marrying into his family, and his family meant Regina and Camille. My mother-in-law never approved of me. To her, I was a nobody from the east side with no college degree, no family money, and no connections. She had bigger plans for her son, plans that involved country club debutantes and society weddings, not some girl who grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment with a single mother. She made sure I knew my place from day one. The backhanded compliments, the not-so-subtle digs about my clothes, my hair, my cooking. She once told me at Thanksgiving dinner, in front of 12 guests, that she was surprised I knew which fork to use. My sister-in-law Camille was worse in some ways because she pretended to like me when Darius was around. She would hug me, call me sis, act like we were best friends. But the moment he left the room, her face changed. She told me once, while we were alone in the kitchen, that I should enjoy the ride while it lasted because Darius would eventually wake up and realize he had made a mistake. I endured it all because I loved my husband, and I knew he was caught in the middle. He stood up for me when he could, but Regina had a way of making everything about her own suffering, her own sacrifices, and Darius had been trained since childhood to put her needs first. I understood. I tried to be patient. Then Darius got sick, and everything changed. The diagnosis came 8 months before he died. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. By the time they found it, there was nothing they could do except try to buy him time. He went from the strong, vibrant man I married to a shadow of himself in what felt like the blink of an eye. During those 8 months, Regina visited exactly 3 times. Camille visited twice, and only because she needed Darius to co-sign on a new car loan. But I was there every single day. I held his hand through the chemo. I cleaned up after him when he was too weak to make it to the bathroom. I slept in a chair next to his hospital bed because I couldn't bear the thought of him waking up alone. 2 weeks before he died, on a night when the morphine had him drifting in and out of consciousness, he grabbed my hand with surprising strength and looked at me with clear eyes. "Naomi," he whispered, "I need you to promise me something." "Anything," I said, leaning close. "In the next few weeks, things are going to happen that won't make sense. You're going to feel like I abandoned you, like I didn't love you. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Can you trust me no matter what?" I was confused, scared, too exhausted to fully process what he was saying. I thought maybe it was the medication talking. I squeezed his hand and told him I would always trust him, that nothing could ever change what we had. He smiled then, the first real smile I had seen from him in weeks. "Remember the magnolia tree," he said. "Remember what I told you about where I'd hide our treasure." Before I could ask what he meant, his eyes fluttered closed and he drifted back to sleep. I sat there for hours trying to understand, but eventually I convinced myself it was just fever dreams and painkiller confusion. He died on a Tuesday morning in November, with me holding his hand and Regina crying dramatically in the hallway where the nurses could see her. The funeral was beautiful because I planned every detail myself. Regina tried to take over, tried to make it about her grief and her loss, but for once I stood my ground. The service was at the small church where we got married, not the fancy cathedral Regina wanted. The music was jazz, not classical. The flowers were magnolias, his favorite, not the exotic arrangements she ordered. After the burial, everyone gathered at Regina's massive house in Grosse Pointe for the reception. I didn't want to go, but the lawyer said the reading of the will would happen there the following morning, and I was expected to attend. That night, sleeping in the guest room of my mother-in-law's house, I felt more alone than I ever had in my life. I kept touching my phone, scrolling through old pictures of Darius and me, trying to hold on to something that was already gone. The next morning, we gathered in Regina's formal living room. The lawyer was a stern-looking man named Patterson, someone I had never seen before. Regina sat in the largest armchair like a queen on her throne, dressed in an elegant black dress that probably cost more than my car. Camille sat beside her in a matching outfit, her eyes red from crying, though I suspected the tears were more for the cameras than from genuine grief. I sat alone on a small love seat near the window, wearing the same simple black dress I had worn to the funeral because I hadn't thought to pack anything else. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat and began reading from a thick document. There were legal terms I didn't understand, formalities that seemed to go on forever. Then he got to the distribution of assets. To my mother, Regina Harrison, he read, "I leave full ownership of Harrison Art Appraisals, including all business assets, client accounts, and the commercial property at 445 Woodward Avenue. Additionally, I leave her the family residence at 892 Lakeshore Drive in Grosse Pointe, along with all its contents." Regina's face lit up with barely concealed triumph. The business, the house, everything Darius had worked for. To my sister, Camille Harrison, the lawyer continued, "I leave my investment portfolio currently valued at approximately $200,000, as well as the 2023 Mercedes-Benz registered in my name." Camille actually squealed with excitement before catching herself and arranging her face back into a somber expression. $200,000, a luxury car, more than she deserved after barely visiting her dying brother. Then Mr. Patterson turned to me, and I saw something flicker across his face. Pity? Discomfort? I couldn't tell. To my wife, Naomi Harrison, he read, his voice dropping slightly, "I leave the only remaining property from my late grandmother's estate, a small restaurant building located at 27 Oak Street in Magnolia Springs, Mississippi." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Regina laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a full, cruel, belly laugh that echoed off the high ceilings of her formal living room. Camille joined in, the two of them cackling like I was the punchline of a joke 5 years in the making. "Magnolia Springs?" Regina wheezed between laughs. "Is that even a real place? It sounds like something from a bad movie." "A restaurant," Camille added, wiping tears of laughter from her eyes. "Probably some roach-infested shack in the middle of nowhere. How fitting." I sat frozen, unable to move, unable to speak. I kept waiting for the lawyer to say there was more, that there had been some mistake. But Mr. Patterson just closed his folder and stood up, avoiding my eyes. "That concludes the reading," he said quietly. "Mrs. Regina Harrison, as the primary beneficiary, I'll need you to sign some documents. We can handle that in the study." He practically ran from the room, leaving me alone with the two women who had made my life miserable for 5 years. Regina's laughter died as soon as the lawyer was out of sight. Her face transformed into something cold and hard, a mask of pure contempt. "Well," she said, rising from her chair and walking toward me, "I suppose this is goodbye, Naomi. It's clear now what my son really thought of you in the end." "This doesn't make sense," I whispered, still in shock. "Darius loved me. He wouldn't." "Wouldn't what?" Camille interrupted. "Wouldn't finally see you for what you are? A gold digger who latched onto a dying man? That's not true. I was there every day. I took care of him while we what?" Regina's voice turned to ice. "While we gave him space to die with dignity instead of hovering over him like some desperate nursemaid hoping for a payout?" She leaned down close to my face. "The difference is, we're family, real family, and family sticks together. You were just a phase, Naomi. A mistake my son corrected in his final days." I couldn't stop the tears from falling, not because of the inheritance, I had never cared about the money, but because in that moment, I believed her. I believed Darius had stopped loving me, that everything we shared had been a lie. Now, Regina said, straightening up and smoothing her dress. "I believe you have some packing to do. I'll give you 2 hours to collect your personal belongings from the guest room. After that, security will escort you off the property." 2 hours? But I live here. This was supposed to be temporary until... Until what? Until you convinced yourself you had some claim to my family's assets? Regina smiled coldly. "You have no claim here, dear. The guest room was a courtesy that has now expired. My advice? Take that little restaurant in Mississippi and try to make something of yourself. God knows you have nothing else." What happened next was a blur. I remember going to the guest room, throwing my few possessions into a trash bag because I didn't even have a suitcase. I remember Camille standing in the doorway, watching me with a smirk. I remember the security guard, a young man who couldn't meet my eyes, walking me to the front gate. And I remember standing on the sidewalk in the December cold, in a wealthy neighborhood where I clearly didn't belong, with nothing but a garbage bag and my purse, wondering what I was supposed to do now. I ended up at a Greyhound station because I couldn't afford a plane ticket and I had nowhere else to go. My mother had passed years ago. I had no siblings. My friends from before Darius had drifted away during my years of being absorbed into his family's world. The only thing I had was an address in Mississippi for a restaurant I had never seen. The bus ride was 19 hours of hard seats, crying babies, and the lingering smell of fast food and diesel. I sat with my forehead pressed against the cold window, watching America scroll by in a blur of bare trees and gray skies. I kept replaying everything in my mind, Darius's final words, the magnolia tree, hiding our treasure. What did it mean? Was it just the rambling of a dying man, or was there something more? By the time the bus pulled into a tiny station that was little more than a gas station with a bench, I was exhausted beyond measure. The driver called out Magnolia Springs, and I stumbled off into the Mississippi morning. The town was exactly what Regina had mocked. Tiny, rural, one main street with a handful of businesses, most of them looking like they had seen better days. Old men sat on porches watching me with curious eyes. A stray dog trotted past, sniffing at my garbage bag with interest. I asked the gas station attendant for directions to 27 Oak Street. He looked at me strange when I mentioned it. "You mean Miss Pierline's old place?" he asked. "That building's been closed up for years. Nobody's been there since she passed." "You family?" I explained that I had inherited it from my husband. The man's eyebrows rose, but he pointed me down the main road, past the church, left on Oak. "Can't miss it," he said. "It's the one that looks abandoned." He wasn't wrong. The building that was supposed to be my inheritance looked like it was one strong wind away from collapsing. Paint peeling off in sheets. Windows boarded up with plywood that had started to rot. The sign above the door was so faded I could barely make out the words Pierline's Kitchen in what might have once been red letters. I stood in front of it for a long time, letting the reality sink in. This was it. This was what Darius had left me. After 5 years of marriage, after standing by him through everything, this crumbling shell was supposed to be my future. I sank down onto the broken front steps and cried until I had nothing left. When the tears finally stopped, I just sat there, empty and numb, staring at the weeds growing through the cracks in the sidewalk. I noticed something strange. Among all the dead brown weeds and scraggly grass, there was one splash of green. A small magnolia tree, no more than 3 feet tall, planted in a decorative pot beside the front door. It was the only living thing that looked cared for. The leaves were healthy, green and waxy despite the December chill. Someone had been tending to this plant, recently, and suddenly, Darius's words came flooding back. "Remember the magnolia tree. Remember what I told you about where I'd hide our treasure." My heart started pounding. I scrambled off the steps and knelt beside the pot. It was heavy, but I managed to tip it to the side, spilling dark soil onto the cracked sidewalk. And there, buried in the dirt, was a small metal box. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single key, old and brass, and a folded piece of paper. I unfolded the paper and saw Darius's handwriting, the familiar messy scrawl that I had loved for years. "The real door is in the kitchen, behind the old stove. The code is the day we met." I grabbed the key and practically ran to the front door. It was padlocked, but the key fit perfectly. The lock clicked open, and I pushed inside. The interior was dark and musty, filled with the smell of dust and old grease. I turned on my phone's flashlight and made my way through what had once been a dining room, now filled with draped furniture and boxes, toward the back where I assumed the kitchen was. The kitchen was a wreck of rusted appliances and rotting cabinets, but against the back wall there was an old industrial stove that looked far too heavy for its surroundings. I approached it slowly, heart hammering in my chest. Behind the stove, barely visible in the beam of my flashlight, was a door. Not a regular door, but a heavy metal one, like something from a bank vault, painted to blend in with the grimy wall. There was a keypad on the front. The code is the day we met, July 14th. The art show. The crying woman and the kind man with the handkerchief. I punched in 0714. A soft beep, a mechanical whir. The door swung open, and I completely lost the ability to breathe. The room behind the door was not what I expected. It was not a small closet or a hidden pantry. It was a proper room, maybe 20 feet by 15, climate-controlled and humming with quiet electricity, and every inch of wall space was covered with art. Not just any art. Paintings I recognized from magazines and museum catalogs, a small Basquiat, a Kara Walker silhouette, what looked like an original Romare Bearden collage, and dozens more I didn't recognize but that radiated value and significance. In the center of the room was a small desk with a laptop computer, closed and waiting. Beside it was a single envelope with my name written on it in Darius's handwriting. I sank into the chair, opened the envelope, and began to read. My dearest Naomi, if you're reading this, then my plan worked. You found your way here, which means you trusted me, even when everything seemed designed to break that trust. I'm sorry for what you had to endure. I'm sorry for the humiliation of that reading, for whatever my mother and sister did to you afterward. I knew it would be cruel. I was counting on their cruelty. Let me explain. The business you think my mother inherited? It's worthless. For the past 3 years, I've been quietly draining it of any real assets, transferring money out through a series of shell companies that she'll never be able to trace. The client accounts? Most of them are fake entries I created to inflate the books. The commercial property? Mortgaged to the hilt. When the bank auditors come knocking next month, and they will, she'll discover that she didn't inherit a thriving business. She inherited a mountain of debt. The house in Grosse Pointe? Same story. I took out 3 separate home equity loans over the past year, using the money to fund what you're standing in right now. The bank will foreclose within 60 days. Camille's investment portfolio? Almost entirely fictional. The statements she's been receiving are from an account that exists only on paper. The car has 6 months of payments left that nobody's going to make. They thought they were getting everything. In reality, they were fighting over an empty box while the real treasure was waiting here for you. Naomi, what you're looking at in this room is the culmination of 15 years of collecting. Pieces I acquired long before we met, hidden away because I knew my family would try to take them. The collection is worth, at last appraisal, approximately $47 million. But that's not all. In the laptop on this desk, you'll find access to accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Singapore. Liquid assets totaling another $12 million. There's also documentation for a small gallery space in Paris, fully paid for, in a neighborhood that is about to undergo significant development. And there's contact information for a man named Jean-Pierre Rousseau. He's been managing my international art dealings for a decade. He's expecting you. He'll teach you everything you need to know. I know this is overwhelming. I know you never cared about money, which is exactly why I'm trusting you with all of it. You'll use it right. You'll do good things. And you'll live the life you deserve, free from my mother's shadow. One more thing. In the top drawer of the desk, there's a phone, fully charged. There's a video on it that I recorded last month. I wanted to say goodbye properly. I wanted to explain everything in my own voice. I love you, Naomi. I loved you from the moment I saw you crying in front of that painting. I loved you through every dinner where my mother humiliated you. I loved you through every day of my illness when you never once complained about how hard it was. I loved you, and this is my way of loving you forever. Go to Paris. Start over. Be happy. Yours eternally, Darius. I don't know how long I sat there crying. Time lost all meaning. I cried for the husband I had lost, for the love I had almost stopped believing in, for the sheer, overwhelming magnitude of what he had done. When I finally had the strength, I opened the desk drawer and found the phone. I turned it on, found the video file, and pressed play. And there he was, my Darius. Thin and pale, but with that familiar warmth in his eyes. "Hey, beautiful," he said, and I broke down all over again. "I know you're probably a mess right now. Ugly crying, snot everywhere, the whole thing." He laughed weakly. "I wish I could be there to hold you. But since I can't, you're going to have to settle for this. I need you to know something. Everything that happened, the will, the way I left everything to them, it wasn't because I stopped loving you. It was because I love you more than I ever knew how to say. My mother and Camille, they would have made your life hell if they thought you had anything worth taking. They would have dragged you through courts and lawyers and public humiliation for years. The only way to protect you was to make them believe you were worthless, to make them so satisfied with their victory that they'd forget you even existed. And you know my family. I knew exactly what they would do. I knew they'd throw you out. I knew they'd laugh in your face. And I knew their greed would blind them to everything I was really doing. The restaurant, Naomi. My grandmother built it with her own hands in the 1,960 seconds, when a black woman owning a business in Mississippi was practically unheard of. She was the strongest woman I ever knew, until I met you. When I was a kid, I used to visit her in the summers. She taught me everything about art, about seeing beauty where others only saw ordinary things. When she died, she left me this building, and my mother never thought it was worth anything. She was wrong. I've been preparing this for 3 years. Every treatment I missed, every meeting I skipped, I was here, building this room, gathering these pieces, setting up the accounts, making sure that when I was gone, you would be taken care of in a way nobody could ever take from you. Jean-Pierre is waiting in Paris. He's a good man. He'll show you the gallery, introduce you to the right people. You don't have to become some art world expert overnight. You just have to show up, learn, grow, become the woman I always knew you could be. And Naomi, this is important. Don't waste your energy on hatred. My mother and Camille, they'll get what's coming to them. The banks, the creditors, the IRS, they'll all come knocking soon enough. You don't have to lift a finger. Justice will find them. But you get to focus on living, travel, see the world, eat at fancy restaurants and never feel guilty about it. Fall in love again if that's what your heart wants. Don't you dare spend the rest of your life mourning me. I want you to be happy. That's my final wish. That's the only thing I'm asking of you. I love you. I always loved you. I will love you from wherever I end up. Now go. Go live. Go be free. And if you ever miss me, just find a magnolia tree. I'll be there." The video ended, and I sat in that hidden room surrounded by millions of dollars worth of art, crying and laughing at the same time. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Jean-Pierre sent someone to Mississippi to help me arrange the transport of the artwork to a secure facility in Paris. I learned how to access the offshore accounts. I discovered that Darius had even set up a monthly stipend for the local man who had been tending the magnolia plant, an elderly gardener named Mr. Willis, who had known Darius's grandmother and had kept her memory alive all these years. I paid Mr. Willis enough to retire comfortably. I also tracked down the bus driver who had let me ride even when I was short on the fare, and I sent him a gift card for enough money to take his whole family on vacation. And then, 3 weeks after finding the hidden room, I boarded a first-class flight to Paris. The gallery was beautiful, small but elegant, tucked away in the Marais district. Jean-Pierre met me at the door with a warm handshake and genuine respect in his eyes. "Your husband spoke of you constantly," he said in his French-accented English. "He said you were the most genuine person he had ever known." I can see he was right. In the months that followed, I threw myself into learning the business. Art history, authentication, the delicate dance of gallery openings and collector relationships. I was terrible at first, making mistakes that Jean-Pierre gently corrected. But I got better, slowly, then faster. The thing about being underestimated your whole life is that you learn how to study, how to adapt, how to survive. 6 months after arriving in Paris, I received an email from a lawyer back in Michigan. I almost deleted it, assuming it was spam, but something made me open it. It was news about Regina and Camille. The banks had foreclosed on everything. The house, the business property, all of it. Creditors had discovered the depth of the financial manipulation Darius had orchestrated, and while there was no criminal fraud since Darius was dead, the debts were very real, and they had been left to the people who inherited them. Regina and Camille were now living in a 2-bedroom apartment in a part of town they once would have sneered at. Regina had tried to contest the will, claiming that Darius was not of sound mind when he wrote it, but the lawyers found evidence that he had been planning this for years, long before his diagnosis. There was nothing she could do. The last part of the email included a forwarded message, apparently sent by Camille to an old college friend, which had somehow made its way to the lawyer. In it, Camille complained bitterly about their circumstances, about how unfair everything was, about how that worthless woman Naomi had probably known about the hidden assets all along. I read it once, then deleted the email without responding. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no glee, no urge to gloat. They had chosen their path, and that path had led them exactly where it was always going to lead. My path was different now. Today, 2 years after Darius's death, I run one of the most respected small galleries in Paris. I've expanded into contemporary African American artists, helping to bring attention to voices that the mainstream art world often overlooks. I've used some of the fortune to establish a scholarship fund for young women from backgrounds like mine, girls who never thought they'd have a chance at something more. I've even started dating again. Nothing serious yet, but I'm open to it. Darius was right. Mourning him forever wouldn't honor his memory. Living fully would. Last week, I was walking through the Jardin du Luxembourg when I spotted a magnolia tree in full bloom. I stopped beneath it, closed my eyes, and let the sweet fragrance wash over me. "I'm doing it," I whispered. "I'm living. I'm happy. Just like you asked." A light breeze rustled the branches, and for just a moment I could have sworn I felt Darius's presence beside me, warm, steady, proud. I smiled, wiped the single tear from my cheek, and kept walking into my new life. Now I want to hear from you. What city are you listening from? Drop a comment below and let me know what you thought of Darius's plan. Was he right to leave everything to his mother and sister, knowing it would destroy them? Or should he have found another way? If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to Black Queen's Vengeance. There are so many more stories waiting to be told. On your screen, you'll see 2 more tales of triumph and justice that I think you'll love. Thank you for being here with me. Until next time, remember, the people who underestimate you are just building the foundation for your revenge. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next story.